Imagine this. You see your favorite video game turn into a different form of media. Something perhaps like a movie or even a TV show, and then you wonder to yourself, why does it feel different? Why does it seem as if something is missing? It's like as if you found a really good restaurant spot that serves your favorite pizza toppings, and you say to yourself, oh my god, yes, I'm gonna try this at the spot near my place. And then it tastes similar, but it seems just a bit off. This is the case with the video game show The Last of Us, where it looks and sounds the same, but something is a bit different.
Swear to me that everything you said about the Fireflies is true.
The Last of Us has sparked one of the biggest adaptation debates in gaming, and the fandom completely split. Yeah, the show was a super disappointing adaptation for me despite being solid on its own. The game just did almost everything better. Others argue the opposite. For people who didn't play the games, the show actually seemed to reach a far greater emotional height than the first game ever did.
And I will fall asleep in your arms.
Then there's the comparison no one can escape. In the game, you're not watching Joel and Ellie. You are Joel and Ellie. So let's slow down and actually break this debate apart. The Last of Us didn't just switch mediums, it switched the entire logic of how its world works, how atmosphere is built, how the story lands, and how we connect to its characters. We're looking at three things: atmosphere, story structure, and character adaptation. So right off the bat, the show has a beautiful atmosphere. Ruined cities, fungal overgrowth, prestige TV lighting, it's cinematic and carefully composed. When the show wants emotional impact, it gets it. But atmosphere in the game isn't about visuals, it's about doing. You creep through hallways, you scavenge, you survive, your heartbeat becomes part of the tension. The world matters because you're the one keeping Joel and Ellie alive. In the show, that feeling disappears. You're not immersed, you're watching, and that creates distance. I personally caught myself zoning out, grabbing snacks, and even getting sleepy at times. In a game, that would never happen. You're either fully engaged or you stop playing entirely, and that difference changes everything. The game builds its narrative through long gameplay loops, which includes exploration, combat, downtime, and environmental storytelling and cutscenes. That pacing creates emotional weight, and a TV show cannot replicate that. Episodes need tight arcs, quick hits, and streamlined subplots. Major emotional moments get compressed or rearranged. In his article, Spence notes, shows on HBO and other marquee cable channels often distinguish themselves by disrupting network television's balance of serial and episodic narrative structures. Spence uses the episode Long, Long Time as an example. When discussing the episode, instead of following Joel and Ellie's cross-country journey, it zooms in on a 20-year romance between Bill and Frank. Beautiful episode, but completely different storytelling logic. What took hours of interactive build-up in the game becomes a few minutes of passive viewing. The friction, the exhaustion, and the lived-in feeling
partner
is lost. When it comes to characters, the show does expand on backstories and emotional beats, but it does shift the tone. Some characters become gentler or more symbolic to appeal to the wider audience. The game's messiness and moral ambiguity, the idea that Joel might be wrong, that Ellie might be selfish, that nobody is clean, that nuance gets smoothed out. I personally have played the game and I loved it, and I stand on the viewpoint that the show doesn't trust viewers the same way the game trusts players. Meanwhile, newcomers praise the show for making motivations clearer. Both perspectives make sense, but they highlight the cost of adaptation. From a filmmaking standpoint, The Last of Us TV series is very well made. It's emotional, polished, and beautifully acted. But that polish comes at a price. You lose the slow interactive atmosphere, you lose pacing shaped by gameplay rather than screenwriting, and you lose character arcs formed through player action, not directed scenes. That is the core problem with adapting a game like this. You can recreate the plot and visuals, but without interactivity, you can't recreate the experience. And that's why I think a perfect game adaptation might just be impossible.
Character-player relationship.
you have no idea what loss is.
A player oneself into a given role in a fixed narrative or closely following a character through their story. This mechanic of a video game is often overlooked when bringing a video game into cinema. The way a player interacts with the game environment gives the player their own interpretation of the story. Also, the way they interact with the game rules, NPCs, or even objects dictates the way the story is conveyed to the player. Having a scripted narrative, but not following a strict set of rules. Say, for example, you have two sets of players, one named Tommy and the other one named Bob. Bob here loves playing story games and enjoys every second of the story, going through and watching all the cutscenes and going through every single little detail of said game. This meaning Bob will understand and be invested in all the characters and relationships built throughout the game.
Even if you get her out of here, then what?
He plays as if he is living these events in real time, being and playing alongside these people. Then we can compare it to a player like Tommy. Tommy here likes to play more fast-paced games like Fortnite or even Valorant. But then, all of a sudden, he hears his friend talking about a game called The Last of Us.
Stop!
We can talk
Back
about
the fuck up!
This game also has guns and shooting people. It's just like Fortnite.
Tommy then gives the game a try, but through his playthrough, he skips every single cutscene, shooting everyone during the story. Basically, speedrunning the entire story, only shooting the people that appear on his screen. Here, we have majority of the player base where the character-player relationship is non-existent. As compared to someone like Bob, he enjoys the characters, the plot, and even the mechanics of the game. This basically showing how the character-player relationship is the most important part of the game, giving each player their own individual experience and investment into the game. The backstory, the conflict, the growth. Basically know the ins and outs of every single character as if you were living it. Now, imagine that I was totally wiped, and instead, being forced to put the story in a singular narrative, having to skip or cop out early on different story points.
And with the show only carrying on the quote-unquote wanting to kill Joel part from the games in regards to Abby's character, it struggles to translate her trauma into the show's writing, which is where most of the critiques of Season 2 stem from. The way the writers handle both Abby and Ellie's trauma contrasts with how it's handled within the video games, something that is awfully visible when comparing the two mediums. In the games, the players are allowed to connect to both Ellie and Abby because we embody them while they experience their trauma rather than simply observe. This is because we as players are able to form strong connections with the protagonist because of the psychological mechanics the game provides for the characters. In The Last of Us Part 1, the winter chapter has the players playing as Ellie for the first time, shifting away from Joel's POV and having to embody her as she is forced to kill David, and we are basically guiding her through that moment. Similarly, we watch Joel's death through her perspective in its sequel game, rather than an outsider's perspective, but it feels rather personal because we are connected with the characters. We also see the event that changes Abby's life from two perspectives. In Joel's, as he kills her father, and in hers, as we watch her father die in front of her from the first game's ending, almost seeing our protagonists be parallels to each other. The show fails to replicate this depth, mostly because we are observing it rather than embodying it. In Stephen Michael Johnson's analysis of PTSD in the world of The Last of Us Part 2, the use of pacing, agency, and interaction allows us to connect with our flawed protagonists even further, something that the show suffers with. This is something that Abby's characterization struggles with. Her characterization feels flatter, more black and white, rather than nuanced compared to her game counterpart, where her interaction with Joel lacked the emotional part to it, making her entirely the villain rather than a complex antagonist.
You actually are.
And without time in her POV, we don't necessarily understand her goals yet compared to the game.
I saved your life.
Meanwhile, Ellie feels distanced. In the games, we explore her as a character while playing her, but in the show, it almost tells us to rely on what we previously knew from the games themselves, where the writers heavily focus on one chapter of the game to adapt and either ignore or give us less time in certain places, making it feel like Ellie's arc in the second season is less grounded while Abby's is underexplored overall. This also shows that the show suffers from telling and not showing in some aspects.
That was my dad.
This shows that the current structure of the show isn't able to accurately depict the complexities of these two characters, highlighting that it isn't easy telling the same story in two different mediums where the game excelled and the show failed.
Good. Abby!
Well, that concludes our take on how games can lose its spark through cinema. Obviously, The Last of Us is not the only game falling victim to this. There are many different examples. Like, there's Minecraft or Mortal Kombat, but then again, the list is endless. Although some adaptations give a different perspective, a lot of games now lose that certain feeling. You know, the feeling of being connected to characters, or that feeling of being invested in what they're doing. A lot of stuff is now just turning into random cinema mop. But if you're listening, HBO, please, and I say please, fix The Last of Us. Thank you.